basic stuff when it comes to your digital brand. What should you have when it comes to across all of your social media platforms?
Well, the first thing to remember is that whether it's a digital brand or a TV commercial that you're putting out there on TV, your branding needs to be consistent. Your brand is the same across, it needs to be the same across all platforms that you use, whether that be from Facebook to a TV commercial to a print advertisement to a brochure that sits on your counter. Your branding really needs to be consistent. We always say consistency is key. And so I think one thing that we're seeing is that more business owners have immediate access to some of these branding tools like digital marketing, so Facebook, for instance, or LinkedIn, and which is a really great thing. It gives us that immediate access to control our brand and the image that we're putting out there. But one thing that tends to happen sometimes is we don't always know what to do with that, right? Mm-hmm. Because so your client, for instance, is she knows her stuff when it comes to the beauty world and what her business is, but branding may not be something that she's really worked in before. And so that's where consistency is key. I would say would be the number one thing to remember.
Great. And talk about a little bit, I was telling this client of mine, or this future client of mine too, about the different audiences on each social media platform. So it's not just, you're not just dumping out the same kind of content on LinkedIn that you would dump out on Facebook. This is about strategy. This isn't about just taking a link or writing something and just putting the same thing everywhere. Can you talk about the different people who are maybe on these platforms and how you change the content for your clients when it comes to each one?
Yeah, so while consistency is key, we still need to be crafting our messaging so that we're talking directly to that audience. Personalization is really key. And so LinkedIn, for instance, it's the #1 global networking site for businesses. We're talking millions of users, but it's very business oriented. When people are on LinkedIn, even think of when you're on LinkedIn, or when you're on LinkedIn, you're in that business mindset. Even if it's 8 o'clock at night, if you're on LinkedIn, you're thinking with your business hat on. Versus Facebook, which is very much social in all of the ways we think of the word social. So when that same CEO is on Facebook instead of LinkedIn, they're there for social reasons. So, they're still obviously a CEO. They always wear that business hat, but you're going to craft your message a little differently because you're likely reaching that person when they're at home, when they're in that social mindset. Maybe they've just had dinner with their family and they're settling down to whatever they're going to do. Maybe they're going to look on Facebook at some family photos or catch up on things their friends are doing or events in the community, that sort of thing. So you want to take that same message that you have, keep your branding consistent, but shift your message so that it's a little more conversational on Facebook versus LinkedIn, because you have to recognize where you're reaching that person and what mindset they're in.
That's a great point. So it's not just that there's different people on LinkedIn and it pulls different demographics. It might be heavier male, it might be heavier at CEO, like you're saying, and there's different audience on Facebook. It might be heavier female, but say somebody's on all the platforms. They're on that platform to look for something specific. And I think that's brilliant. Like, here's an example, like I'm the CEO of my company, but when I am on LinkedIn, I am looking for clients. I might be responding to clients. I might be looking for specific information that might be more, business oriented, like you said. But when I jump onto Instagram, I might be looking for before and afters on hair color or, beauty things for my clients, how to make their eyes pop or whatever it is. But, you have to use each platform for what somebody might be looking for and on that platform. So let's use I want to use an example. So let's just use the example of this client that I was talking to this week. She does beauty, and I told her, for example, on LinkedIn, she might want to talk about haircuts, etc., for making you feel more confident at work in the boardroom, what looks professional. But then on Facebook, she might do before and afters of all that silly color that she does, like not silly color, but like, if she's doing some cool lavenders or whatever, that might be more of before and afters on Facebook and Instagram. Would you agree, Julie?
Absolutely. That's a really great example of how to differentiate the content between the platforms. And I'll take it one step further, just add to this conversation you're having with the client. Oftentimes we don't feel like the thought of creating new or different content for each platform, that sounds like a lot of work, because it is a lot of work, right? And so if you have the ability to create all new content, absolutely do it. But if you don't, just change up how you're writing around that. So let's say she puts together, let's say they craft this great blog post on, hairstyles to make you feel confident at work, right? So when you can still share that on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, but you're just going to change your messaging around it. So maybe instead of sharing that in the middle of a busy work week on Facebook, maybe you're going to share it on a Sunday evening when people are on Facebook, but they're starting to already think about how the weekend's coming to an end. They've got Monday morning on their mind. And so maybe you're just crafting that message a little differently, sharing it on a different day. And reaching that same or a similar, maybe not the same audience necessarily, but a similar audience, but you're still going to reach them where they are in that mindset they're in. One thing I want to add to, Kathryn, we did talk earlier about, you and I were chatting earlier about how there is a different demographic on the various platforms. And so, yes, we know that there are many people who use several platforms. So yes, they're on more than one. But it is true that the demographics are a little bit different. So Twitter, for instance, skews more male than female, and has a slightly older audience. Older, not meaning old, but when we're looking at the generations and the demographics that you're targeting, you're going to be looking there for maybe 35 and up. And it really has a sweet spot with the 50s and 60s men. And one kind of theory behind that is maybe men are more interested in their sports scores and their quick one-liners and sharing information that way instead of scrolling through pictures. And, not to stereotype, but that's, one school of thought out there. Versus Instagram. Here's a great example because it's all pictures. You can share links in your bio, but links aren't clickable with an Instagram post, so it's very difficult to share content that way. But pictures are obviously key, and we know that Instagram really skews for a younger audience. So now that doesn't mean that only millennials or only Gen Z is on Instagram. That's not true. We know that all demographics are on Instagram. It just means that is the platform that if you're looking to reach millennials, for instance, or if you're looking to reach teenagers, then that is the platform you should focus your time and effort on. But it doesn't mean that other audiences aren't there.
Let's talk about some real super basic. So when you've got your digital brand, and again, there's some people at home who'll be watching this or from the office, they'll be like, I got that down. We're just going over some real basics, because sometimes Julie and I assume that this is common sense, but sometimes we realize, we have to realize that we need to remind people about some of the basics. And that would be making sure that you have the same name across all of your platforms. That is, if you're trying to attract business, you're trying to get people to buy your product, your service, you're trying to get more followers, so when you meet someone or they see you on TV or they see you on stage, when they go to search for you and they want to follow you everywhere because they're now like your biggest fan, you want to make sure that your name is similar or the same, I would say the exact same, across all platforms. And also, Julie, why don't you take picture? Like the picture should be the same too, right?
Oh, yes. So think of it in terms of if someone's going to seek you out after seeing a post or after hearing about you through posts that friends have shared, how are they going to find you? How are they going to know it's you? And what image are you trying to convey? So absolutely. Keeping the consistency, keeping it the same so people recognize you. I mean, imagine if, Pepsi or Coke had multiple versions of their logo, that everywhere you looked, you saw a different version of Pepsi. It would be confusing. We wouldn't, when you see the Pepsi logo, you know what's in that can. You know what you're about to drink. It should be the same thing no matter what type of business you have. Now, that doesn't mean that within the imagery and some of the photos and graphics and video that you build around your logo and your brand, that can change. Mm-hmm. But you still really want to be consistent in style. And certainly, across multiple platforms, your name should always be the same. And it should be The same as what your Google listing is, what's on your website, what's in, on your business cards. Any way that people are going to find you and come across that name, it needs to be the same. You don't want to leave any room for confusion. We already know that when it comes to branding is one of the least sexy topics for us to talk about, because one, it's so hard to track, right? Even in this digital, age that we're in, it's really hard to track awareness. And so, it's not as exciting as some of the other things that we can dive into, because it's not as concrete. But we do know that repetition is what sells. And so when people see the same thing over and over, they see it across multiple platforms, they're going to have an easier time of remembering who you are, and who you want them to know you to be. Because let's remember too, that when it comes to branding, we all have what we think we are, and then we have what others think we are. So making sure that we can align that up as much as possible is really the key to winning the branding game.
Right. And the best way to do that is to have someone from outside of your organization tell you, this is what your brand looks like. This is what it looks like you're selling. Is that indeed your desire? Is that what you're trying to sell? Is this the story that you're trying to tell? Because this is what it's saying online. So it's really nice to have someone from outside the organization, not your wife, not your husband, not your best friend, not your staff, because they know your brand in and out. It's nice to have someone from outside say, this is what I'm seeing that you're portraying. Does that align with what you're trying to sell? Does that align with the thing that is the highest value for you to sell too? Because maybe you have lots of products, maybe you have lots of services, but you're truly getting the people who are just buying maybe the least, bang for your buck. You want to make sure that you're getting, if there's something that makes you as a company a ton of money, you want to make sure that those are the kind of people that you are attracting. You're opening up that lead magnet and you're increasing your funnel to attract all of those people who are going to end up buying your top product. Of course, you want to attract if you need all different levels, but if there's one thing that really makes you money and really, you enjoy doing, you want to make sure that you're selling that on your brand cohesively, smart, that it's working for you. Anything else, Julie, that came up this week that you saw with clients, or you're talking to future clients and you saw when it comes to their brand, personally or professionally?
Yeah. So, touching on what you just said, we're working with a client who's a dentist, and so when really the conversation we had this week was aligning the strategic business goals with the marketing, right? So she's a dentist. She has a great practice, has, patients walking in the door, new patients walking in the door every week, which is great, right? Everyone wants that. But there's a difference between having people walking in the door and having the right people walking in the door. So she's a dentist, does all of the typical dental imagine, but for her, the business, the potential for growth is not in just doing teeth cleanings, or some of the typical dental work that we might think of. The growth for her practice is in some of the other work that she does. She actually, because of her training, her schooling, she also does Botox for migraines, and she does various treatments for the neck and the face. Because again, went to medical school for a long time. She's an expert in this area. And so that's what she enjoys doing, for one, and also what is going to help grow her business and take her business from the current level where she is, which is very successful, but take it to that next level and help her to grow. And so those are the things we look at when we look at our marketing and our branding and in building that business. What are your business goals, and how can we focus on that target audience instead of just casting that wide net out to everyone? Let's focus on getting the right people. So that was one conversation this week that was very beneficial that we like to have with our clients.
That's an excellent example. I love that example. Well, good. And again, if when we go off here, you just let us know during the replay. If you're watching with the replay, comment below. Let us know if there's any questions you have when it comes specifically. Antonia Roman, we really appreciate your comment that you said, thanks so much for explaining the different ways on how to reach our social media platform audiences. Yeah, that's super important. Like, you're creating awesome content, but you have to make sure that you write it specifically for what that person is looking for on that platform at that moment. And that was the biggest, probably the takeaway I hope that people who are watching get from today's training, is that really, and like Julie said, it's not really that you have to write all of this new content. It's just tweaking it for that specific social platform. And it could be tweaking the caption, the subject line, getting into that blog. Why that person on that social media platform wants to read that blog. Right, Julie? Like it could be just, updating the summary to get people into that blog.
Yeah, the scheduling tools that we have are amazing. Whether you use Buffer or Hootsuite or, a whole plethora of tools, they're great, but don't fall into the trap of creating one post to connect to your link or your image and then just sending it out over all of the platforms. Take the extra couple of minutes, because it really doesn't take too much time. You're sharing the same content, but take the extra couple of minutes to really refine how you're sharing that content across each of the platforms. It's still great to use those scheduling tools, saves a lot of time, but just refine the message so that you're hitting that right target audience per platform.
That's excellent. I think one of the first things we do when we get new clients is unlink all their social platforms. They all go like, I linked them all because it's great. I can post once, and then they go everywhere. I'm like, no, that's not the way you do it. So it's good. That's really good advice. And again, thanks for watching. And please comment below if you have any questions. Again, we were joined by Julie Holton, who owns mConnexions, and that is a digital marketing agency here in the United States of America. I'm not even going to say the state because she helps people all around the country. And I am Kathryn Janicek. I help you with all your media, public speaking, and just looking good on video, online, on stage, and in the media.